Hi, I'm Nicholas Johnson with TheGunBlog.ca. One day, a year ago, two police and two paramedics stormed into the home of Kassandra, handcuffed her to a stretcher, interrogated her, raided her apartment, and seized her firearms. She joins me from Toronto, Canada, to talk about the events of that day and what has happened since then, and then the broader context of so-called red flag laws. We're also joined by a paramedic we're calling Jake, that's not his real name, who is friends with Kassandra. And I've agreed to not use their real names to protect their identity and to avoid any kind of professional repercussions. We are recording this on October 21st, 2020. Thank you both for joining me. Kassandra, please describe what happened that day.
Hi, Nicholas. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you very much for having me. I am happy to finally have the opportunity to break the silence, the very empowering silence that empowers others to do similar things to other citizens. The morning of October 1st, 2019, I was in bed after a long night at work. What happened next changed my life forever. As I said, I was in bed and I heard unusual noises coming from the hallway. It was a noise of something coming down the hallway. It was really, really unusual for my condominium building. I didn't think much of it until I heard the key being turned in my door. In horror, I couldn't believe it. Through the tears in my eyes, I couldn't see well, and all I saw was huge flashlights and stomping, people entering my condo. They entered my bedroom, and I realized it was police. How did I realize that? Because the very former abusive spouse of mine that made that call, I recognized his pattern of action. It didn't take me long to compose myself and realize that I need to be the very best version of myself because I was facing multiple police officers and paramedics coming in and mistreating me. They came into the bedroom, finding me in bed. They took the blanket off of me. I realized what they were looking for because as gun owners, we are prepared. We know that things like that can happen to anyone. They took the blanket off of me, and what they found under the blanket was a woman in a tiny little nightgown. I'm 5'8". I'm 130 pounds. I'm not of intimidating physique. The giant officer, who was 6'5", pulled me out of the bed like a little weed out of the ground and placed me on the floor, staring at my barely covered body with the flashlights and intimidating tone, saying to me that I was going to kill myself. I gained my composure pretty quickly, and I explained to them that not only that I didn't want to kill myself and never did I have suicidal tendencies, the person who had made that call is a discredited former abuser who had a restraining order until a year before.
That's your ex-husband.
Precisely. From that point on, they started asking me questions in a very intimidating manner. Not a minute went by, and the big officer put the handcuffs around my wrists.
And you're still lying on the ground at this point.
No, as I explained before, they plucked me, and by plucking, I mean that they literally pulled me out of the bed and put me on the carpet. So now I'm standing facing them, not resisting, and giving my explanation and my version of the story that unfortunately was not heard. They respond to a call, somebody stating that I am suicidal, And instead of verifying the facts with somebody who is in a condition to answer their questions, they simply handcuffed me, intimidated me, and allowed me to stand there barely covered, trying to answer their questions. So at this point, I was handcuffed. They weren't listening to me, and one of them actually stepped outside into the other bedroom to look for, as he called it, where are the guns? He kept on saying, where are the guns? Where are the guns? As I said, I was trying to be as composed as possible, even though I was shaking and horrified inside. I walked into the living room. Furthermore, I actually asked for their permission to walk into the living room because I realized that their emotions were heightened. Comparably to mine, I guess they thought that they were in more danger than I was in the time. So I walked into the living room and I asked the officers if it was okay by them if I presented the paperwork and my license. As legal gun owners, we're issued little pieces of plastic that allows us to dedicate our free time to our passion and our hobby. And this is what I wanted to do to the officers, who at this point impressed me as someone who is rather uninformed. I then advised them that my paperwork was in order. I showed them my license and my registration for the firearms. And they continued to ask me the same question over and over and over again. Where are the guns? As I said to them, my firearms are stored correctly and in a manner that the law prescribes. We walked into the other bedroom where my gun safe was positioned. They were acting as if I was a criminal, as if I was being charged with something. They did not try to verify the situation or de-escalate it.
How do you know that how do you know that they didn't check with your ex-husband to verify his identity, to verify the facts?
When I started being sarcastic about the caller, explaining to them that it is absolutely impossible for somebody with this kind of a record and reputation to be making allegations and statements like these, they seemed to have no clue as to what I was talking about. I then explained that the individual who made a call, I had a restraining order against him for all the good reasons issued by the very court of law. They seemed to have no idea what I was referring to. My question to them was, how is that possible?
And I want to get to Jake in a sec, but also just to situate for people who might not be familiar, in Canada, it's very restricted about who can own firearms, who can have firearms at home, who can buy, sell, move, or use firearms. An application requires a safety training, a proficiency training, spousal approval, police check, daily police screening, and all that takes several months. And then you get a license card. That's the license card that Kassandra's talking about. You get a license card, and you're only allowed to have firearms if you have that license card. And even though it's quite complicated and involved process, there are millions of people who have firearms in Canada. Jake, did you want to jump in at this stage or anything?
Yeah, I'll just give my 2 cents as to what has been discussed so far. So just to give a little background on me, I'm not just a paramedic. I also did 10 years in the infantry in the Army here in Canada, and I'm also a tactical medical trainer. So while I can't speak to Toronto Police's standard operating procedures, I can speak generally to tactics and to my experiences in these types of calls. Get into any hasn't. What I will say is that it seems like they did not announce their presence as police, and one would think that if your call details have stated that someone has firearms and is imminently suicidal, then they may very well have a firearm in their hand at the moment that you open their door completely unannounced, not saying police, not requesting that the door be opened up, not having the concierge call up, not calling ahead to a cell phone to say that we're coming. And I understand why some of that may not have been done. Some of the rationale behind that might be, if someone's suicidal, you may not want to announce your presence because they may then go out, carry on that act before you enter their door. But specifically from a tactical perspective, if you think someone is going to be suicidal by a firearm, why would you just open their door unannounced? That doesn't seem to make any sense to me. So I think there's going to be more ground that's covered. I am familiar with this case, and I actually also know the paramedics that responded to this call. So I'll jump in as with my 2 cents as more details of this story come out.
Awesome. And I'm just also going to say that we are, well, I'm certainly not a lawyer. I don't think any of us are lawyers. This is not legal advice. This is not tactical advice. We're just having a conversation and hearing from a lived experience. There's also something here that, even if we're gearing this to people who own firearms, it's TheGunBlog.ca, but even for people who don't own firearms, everything you're describing is pretty horrific. A woman at home alone, basically an assault team barges in, handcuffs her. The guns add a nice, unfortunately complicating twist, but even without the guns, this is a pretty big disaster.
Absolutely.
It is indeed, gentlemen, it is a big disaster, and whoever is watching this video, I strongly encourage to learn skills as to situation, go back to the sequence of events that took place that very morning. So now, if you don't mind, with your permission, I'll go ahead and explain to you what happened next. So now I'm standing in front of my safe, pointing out with my 2 hands cuffed behind my back, pointing out to the location of the key to the safe. At this point, I feel like I'm a kindergarten teacher, educating my little children as to the process and as to how it's supposed to be done. We're talking about 3 police officers and 2 paramedics standing by. As I described before, I'm wearing a tiny little nightgown. They opened up the gun safe. They extracted the firearms that I had registered and that I pointed out that I had them registered. They then proceeded to search in the bags and around the bed, trying to find other things. It appeared to me that it was totally uncalled for, because I have shown a complete collaboration and no objections. I said that this was not necessary, turning my apartment upside down, as I gave him everything that I had. However, they continued to ask me questions. Where are your other guns? Where is your other ammo? I asked them a question directly. What other guns? I said, I have given you everything that I have. It sounded like they were trying to catch me, trying to grab onto something so that they could lay charges.
Fishing.
There was another aspect that was really intimidating. Being barely dressed, they saw that I wasn't resisting. And when they asked me if I were to go to the hospital with them, I explained that I would like the establishment fully closed, and if it was okay by them. The big officer that put the cuffs on me said to me that that's a no. The answer will be a no, and that I will have a sheet from a paramedic stretcher, that is, the orange sheet covering me. It was a fall and it was cold. I asked again. He said to me that it's not a protocol and that they cannot leave me alone. However, they had a lady officer present with them. I proposed that she stays with me while I put my tracksuit on. They refused to close the door. At this point, I was really fed up, because I voiced my request very clearly that I do not wish to arrive to a medical establishment in the nightgown. At this point, I decided that I said, if you do not close the door, I will get undressed in front of you and I will. So fine, the lady officer agreed to stay with me, close the door, but the whole dressing process was really intimidating and unnecessary. I was not resisting anything. I was prepared to go with them. I was prepared to have an interview with whichever the medical practitioner that they would assign to me. I had no issues with any of the above. My full collaboration it should have been an indication to them that at least I can get the right to get dressed. I think this was really inappropriate and unnecessary.
And if I may jump in here for a moment.
Yeah, Jake.
You know, when the officer said that she has a blanket and that'll be fine.
Okay, sorry, you're muffled. I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
So, said about the police officer saying, fine, she would have a blanket. Well, was he even thinking about what happens when she's discharged from hospital? Are they going to give her a ride home? No, they're not. She's going to have to get a taxi from hospital in a nightgown. What more humiliating experience for, you know, someone has made a disingenuous call to 911. You've been mistreated by the police, and now you have to leave a hospital barely clothed in public view. It's unconscionable.
I want to ask Kassandra thing. What you've described so far, from the moment you heard the noise to the moment you're getting dressed, how many minutes have elapsed?
We're talking about half an hour, all these conversations and all this convincing and all this babysitting on my behalf, trying to de-escalate the situation and trying to make them feel that I'm not a threat to them. And we're talking about the size difference and the power difference.
And what time is this?
This was between 10 and 11 in the morning.
Okay. And I want to ask Jake. Jake, is this what is called in the profession a wellness check?
Yes, generally yes. It's if someone is concerned for self-harm, this can be referred to as a wellness check or a mental health call, or
because it sounds like a mixture of what I've seen in the headlines: wellness check plus swatting. It's not technically swatting because it wasn't a SWAT team, but is that a fair characterization? Like there's basically someone called in someone came under the pretext of so-called red flag laws of a person who's a danger to themselves or to others.
See, here's the thing. I've done numerous wellness checks. I've never seen one go down like this. Never. And the only difference between the wellness checks that I've done and this wellness check was the presence of firearms.
And that's a major complicating factor, I guess.
My opinion on this is that if the firearms were not a factor, that this would not have been dealt with in an aggressive way. Look, if someone is willing to go to the hospital on a wellness check, usually as paramedics, we'll just dismiss the police. Like, okay, we can take them. They're voluntary. We don't need you guys. And I've never seen a voluntary psychiatric call be treated the way that Kassandra was treated by the police.
Is there also a case where, let's say you get the call, you show up at the person's house, the person is showing mental stability, they're sober, they're functional, they're coherent, they're dealing with a highly articulate person who's calm. Could you just stop there and say, geez, it was a mistake, sorry, we're terribly sorry, we're leaving?
Not if the police make the decision to apprehend.
Okay.
So if the police make the decision to escalate it, it's out of our hands. But yeah, I mean, that's usually how it goes down. If we arrive on scene and they say, no, I'm not suicidal, this is absolutely untrue, this is a total mischaracterization, then, I mean, we can often take the patient to the hospital. If there's no reason to apprehend someone and take them to hospital and they don't want to go, like, paramedics aren't kidnappers. We can't take someone who doesn't want to go to the hospital. The only way that they are going to be forced to go is if they're arrested and apprehended by the police escalating that situation.
Got it.
And this is exactly what happened in my case. Police escalated that after having taken my firearms out of my gun safe. They took my license And that same officer stated that they will be confiscating my firearms, at which point they have given me a property receipt. They also told me if the doctor clears me at the hospital, I can come and collect it. So at this point, there are quite a few interesting details, which I'm sure our viewers will be really curious to find out, and also to show you how outrageous this whole situation it was developing. I was trying to explain to the police officers the nonsense of somebody who has faced criminal charges in the past making allegations like these, that it did not connect on any logical level whatsoever. They weren't receptive to my explanations, and I had to get very nitty-gritty and personal about some of the details. A few years ago, that very person that was charged was charged with uttering death threats. So when you have death threats issued for you, your perception of life changes and your perception of your own well-being and safety changes. I'm the mother of two, and there is nothing else that I want more than to continue living free, being able to make my own choices, and being able to live free of intimidation and constant harassment. I'm a very logical individual, and I have gone ahead and decided to do everything in my power to protect myself from the law standpoint. I empowered two people to act as my powers of attorney over personal care should something ever happen to me, should the wishes of my ex-spouse ever come to fruition, and I'm unable to be healthy enough to act for myself. If I'm unable to protect myself, I want my powers of attorney to do so for me. I explained this to paramedics and the police officers, that I had two powers of attorney over personal care. They were instructed to do everything in their power to keep me alive. I explained to them that there's no logical explanation for someone to do this and then to try to blow their head off with the very tool and the work of art that they have collected and cared for. Obviously, I'm referring to my competition handgun. They did not hear that logical explanation. I then gave him an example, and then turned out that one of my powers of attorney knew the paramedic who was attending on scene. This made the case even a little bit more interesting, because it just proved my point over and over and over again, that the police was not hearing any reasonable explanations or any other communication.
You explaining to them in your condo apartment that I didn't understand the thing that you know someone who knows one of the police on scene.
Can I jump in, Kassandra?
Yes, please do. It will sound even more clear when you explain it, Jake.
Yeah, I'm actually one of Cassandra's powers of attorney. So yeah. It's me who she's referring to, and yeah, I know the medic, or one of the medics who was on that scene, and yeah, and I
Kassandra knew at the scene that you two knew each other?
No, okay. I found out after the fact, because she told me his name, and I said, yes, I know this person. But I can verify that what she's saying, like, I have these power of attorney documents, and she is to be kept alive at all costs. This is not someone who is, you know, people who are suicidal tend not to make those kinds of requests.
God, I was just confused about what is happening in the apartment that morning, and the explanation when you're talking about the powers of attorney, that was in your apartment, or that was sometime later?
I already had these documents on hand, and I was explaining to the paramedics and the police that somebody who places these kind of requests in writing and solidifies them with being stamped by the lawyer's stamp does not tend to be suicidal and does not tend to act like I do. I was trying to make a point to the police that their actions are uncalled for all the reasons that I mentioned just now that they did not verify the information of a caller, that they did not verify who the person that they were investigating were, who was that person, and they did not verify the connection between the two. Had they done it, had they just spent 2 more minutes analyzing all of the data that they have on hand, they probably would never have to open the door forcefully or scare to death.
I as an observer who's finding out these details, we've been talking today and yesterday before this recording, but it sounds like a total abuse of the red flag law system. It sounds, again, hashtag not a cop, not a lawyer. It sounds like an unprofessional response, and I would say irresponsible response. I want to get into the legal, what happened next in terms of lawyers in court and how you got to today, but also something that's on the top of my mind. Several lawyers have given the advice, if basically exercise your right to silence and do not say anything. I think one person says, your best defense is duct tape. Don't say anything. Don't offer any information. Don't open your safe. Are you going to talk about that as well?
Definitely, I will talk about that. And I felt I didn't want to empower them at this point by being silent, because it seemed like provided that they have already put handcuffs on me forcefully, even though I did not resist, provided that they almost forced me to go with them, barely clothed, provided that I wasn't resisting yet again, and I was agreeing to everything, I felt that it wasn't going to take me any further if I just refused to open the safe, refused to show them my firearm license, etc. So I'm going to just finish with this story and the description of events that took place, and then we can elaborate. As I already said, I agreed to go with them to the hospital, and we were on really good terms. I was being very friendly with the officers and paramedics alike, and they felt that almost all of them felt that I was quite coherent, to say the least, and it even is indicated, in fact, in the police report. They took me down in the stretcher, and I explained to them that I did not want to be seen accompanied by police and pulled out in the stretcher in front of my building. So they still cuffed me to the stretcher at this point outside of my apartment, and took me down to the ambulance. So now we're looking at the scene. We're talking about Sinclair Avenue. We have 3 or 4 cruisers, police cruisers, parked in the ambulance. Out, and then they put me in the ambulance on that stretcher. At this point, the police officer comes into the ambulance saying, "I'm going to leave you cuffed, and I'm going to be in the cruiser right behind."
And that officer has the key.
Absolutely, yes.
Oof.
The officer has the key to the cuffs. He just cuffed one arm to the stretcher, stating that he'd be leaving the ambulance and following us in the cruiser. At this point, it's just me cuffed to the stretcher and one paramedic inside the cabin of the ambulance.
This is insane.
I then asked the officer, how is that possible that he is leaving my side with the key to these cuffs? And the answer was, well, if I come with you in the ambulance, then I have to leave my cruiser here. I said, well, this is very little concern of mine. I'd like you to stay. He says, well, then we may get to call to another call. And he gave me some vague excuses that I didn't really register at this point. And I felt really powerless when it came to arguing with someone who just cuffed me to the stretcher and had left with the key. I also wanted to be on as good terms with them as possible because I felt exceptionally intimidated. And so we started riding to the hospital, me, paramedic, and the handcuffs. We arrived to Mount Sinai and we were parked in the hallway. At this point, I will actually let Jake jump in because I know he has lots to say and he has a comment to make about this particular instance and how this was handled.
Yeah, so I've never seen anything like this in my professional career. First of all, I have never seen a voluntary patient apprehended under the Mental Health Act. And I just want to note about this, a Mental Health Act apprehension is on your record forever. There is nothing you can do to get that off of your record. And any time that Kassandra has an interaction with the police after this, they're going to see that she was apprehended under the Mental Health Act, regardless of how frivolous or spurious it was. So these have some severe ramifications for people. And I believe, in my opinion, the only reason I can think for her to be apprehended under the Mental Health Act when she was voluntarily ready to go to the hospital and obviously not suicidal was to justify the confiscation of firearms. And
so sorry, they're say that again. They're in other words, they want to confiscate. The word make up excuse.
I'm not.
We don't know for sure. We're this is just our opinions. We're one side of the story. This is not a court. We're not. But based on the information we have, I'd be curious. Yeah, your opinion.
I'm not going to use the term make up or invent. I'll use the term justify. In order to justify the confiscation of firearms, there has to be the police aren't just in the business of taking property without any kind of cause. They have to. There has to at least be the appearance of cause to confiscate property. So again, I've never seen anything like this in my professional career. And speaking to the handcuffing point, I've never seen anything like that in my professional career. I have never had a patient cuffed without an officer right there. And in my eyes, that's a safety issue. My first year on the job, I responded to a call where I had to pick up some of my colleagues off the side of the road because their ambulance spontaneously combusted due to an electrical issue, or what we believe was believed to have been an electrical issue. Now, sometimes the stretchers, they have a mechanism that locks them into to the ambulance. If that were to malfunction, if there was to be an electrical fire and the power mechanism that locks and unlocks that stretcher were to malfunction, there is a manual override. It takes a few moments to get to. I mean, one wonders, if there was a traffic accident, if there was a fire, if the officer did, as he said, get called to another call, if that was one of the excuses that was given as to why he couldn't ride in the ambulance, what is to be done about that? What is to be done about that? You potentially have someone in a dangerous situation that they have no way out of because paramedics aren't usually in the habit of carrying handcuff keys.
And do they have on an ambulance? I mean, is like bolt cutters or something that you can snap them off? I'm imagining.
No.
Okay. So we're talking about you're handcuffed to the structure that if anything goes wrong, the people, the paradox, not the paradox, but the contradiction, under the guise of protecting your safety, they've effectively highly endangered you.
Potentially.
Well, all of this is potential, right? This is all, this is interesting. Okay, how about, could we get into the legal battle or the court battle or what, yeah.
With pleasure. I'll be very happy to speak to that. So after having spent just an hour and a half with the doctor at the Mount Sinai Hospital, I received the full clearance. It was obvious to him and to everybody else on staff that this was a phony call, that this was just a simple lie. He released me, writing on a pink slip of paper that I'm not suicidal, that I'm not a danger to myself or others. I took an Uber, went home, got my documents and everything, and arrived at the station to collect my property, which I was promised that I'd be able to collect. I presented myself. The officer who actually apprehended me was there. He was really displeased with my appearance, and he asked me, "They let you out so soon?" I said, "Well, what was the expectation? Here I am, please return my property to me immediately." After half an hour standing there at the desk, nothing happened. He reappeared from the back with the green receipts in hand. He explained to me that I will not be getting my property back, that nor will I be getting my license back, and that I can speak to someone, or I can start filling out some forms sometime, maybe next week, whatever. The explanation was very vague. He wasn't clear. And I was in even more shock than before.
So he told you you waited half an hour for the same person to say, sorry, no can do. Go fill out some more paperwork. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
And this is, again, this is Toronto. This is the biggest municipal police force in Canada, the best trained, the best equipped, the people everybody else looks to for leadership. This is also, so this is not some small department dispatch unit in the middle of nowhere. This is supposed to be the elite of the country.
Absolutely. And it appeared to me that the whole operation and the whole functioning of that system from that point on was completely disorganized. One hand did not know what the other one was doing. It was completely unclear who is responsible for what and who is in charge of what. So I was coming back home with those green receipts in my purse. That was the only thing that they gave me back. The next morning, I called every single number under the sun that I started with RCMP, with licensing department, and so on and so forth. And then I got down the ladder, and I wasn't getting a clear response from anybody. And that's very typical with how police treats situations like these. I'm not the first one. I'm not the last one. I remembered that I had a policy, a firearm legal defense insurance policy, that I was advised to purchase by one of the best shooters in the community, my friend, who I started shooting with. And I will obviously keep his name concealed at this time. I went to see my policy documents, and I realized that it stated that the policy would respond should the charges be late. There were no charges late. They simply confiscated my property. I realized, I read in the policy documents that I was entitled to a free legal telephone advice. And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. Good news that I don't have charges late. Bad news, I got to talk to some guy on the phone. So I didn't really have expectations being too high. I gave a call, and within an hour, a lawyer called me back. As I described to him the situation, he said, "You do not need a telephone advice." I said to him, "Well, what do you think I need?" He said, "You need a lawyer. We'll call you back." Within half an hour, a claims adjudicator from the legal defense called me, stating that this situation is very severe. The policy will, in fact, respond to this claim, and they will assign a lawyer to me. I then asked other forms that I need to fill out, and he said, "No, you already have your hands full. We will take care of you." This felt like a warm blanket being wrapped up around someone who is desperate, hypothermic, and really, really scared. I have never seen anything like that.
I want to ask you, I'm a client, personally, I'm a client of Firearm Legal Defense for similar reasons. You're a client. I'm not being paid. Do you have any relationship with Firearm Legal Defense?
Absolutely not.
Besides they're not paying for you they're not paying for you as a spokesman or something. Okay, good.
This is not, I'm not endorsed, and I'm not financed, and I don't have any other affiliation other than being a former client who actually felt really protected.
And that's why I'm asking, because what you're saying is a big endorsement for how you were treated. Okay. I just want to say, for the record, none of us have any undisclosed relationship with them besides being personal clients.
Yes, for the record.
Was your contact with Firearm Legal Defense like the same day as the whole raid?
It was a couple of days later that I had time to speak to my friends, come to my senses, gather some information.
So a couple of days later, two, 3 days?
Yes, 3 days. So, but I have to tell you that between the time that I called the free telephone line, a legal support line, to the time when the lawyer called me, only 12 hours had passed.
And what happens next?
The lawyer was assigned to me, an amazing criminal lawyer that specializes in Firearms Act. he was assigned to me. He took charge of the case, and I barely ever had to deal with these officers again, because the experience was so traumatic that the last thing I wanted to do was to have more dealings with the police. The lawyer took over. He started the process of getting the license back. It took 3 months before we were able to get the license returned to me.
So your firearms you were raided, your firearms are wrongly confiscated, told you'd get them back. It takes 3 months to get them back with a lawyer.
Absolutely. And the lawyer did an amazing job. I have to say that he was very professional. And even with all these efforts and all that organization and all of that being very orchestrated and properly administered, it still took me that long to get my property back. But I've heard of stories, I've heard of people that when it takes them over a year to get that back, and even then they do not get all of their items returned to them.
And also, right now you're very calm, you're articulate, you're composed. What's it like talking about it now compared to being in the middle of it a year ago?
Well, it looks like I'm composed because we're on Skype. God bless COVID-19, at least in this instance, because you cannot see me shaking. You cannot hear me trembling, and my knee
Okay.
trembling against the desk.
Why are you talking about this publicly?
I decided to make this this information known to my fellow gun owners, fellow licensed shooters and hunters, to first of all, to break the silence that always simply encourages the abusers of the system to be stronger, more powerful, and to continue to encourage them to continue to misuse the system. As long as the victims remain silent, nothing will ever change, and more people will be getting in the harm's way when they have done nothing wrong, like it was in my case.
When you talk about the abusers of the system, hashtag joke, you're not talking about the cops, your police, you're talking about your ex-husband who abused the mental health or the red flag law, I don't know the technical term, but he abused that system to have you raided and have your property, have you go through.
Most certainly referring to those who make phony phone calls, who know how to work the system, who know the weaknesses of the system, and who are able to speak the right lingo, who are able to use the right lingo for the police officers to be dispatched.
So anybody who has a bad breakup, there's 2.2 million federally licensed firearm owners in Canada, plus 4,500 businesses. So any disgruntled ex or angry colleague or spiteful family member can call 911 and say, I think this person is a threat, and boom, they could have the same thing that happened to you.
Can I jump in here for a moment?
Yeah, please.
So as a paramedic, and I'm sure as a police officer too, although I can't speak to that side of it, one of the first things you learn on the job is that you take your call details with a grain of salt. Now, when I say call details, I mean the information that dispatch puts up on your screen in the vehicle before you arrive at the call. You're talking
about what pops up on the little screen on the dashboard.
Exactly. Okay. So those are your call details. And you often get to your call and you find out that the details were either miscommunicated to dispatch, they were misrepresented somehow, or that there's more to the story, or whatever. And most of your calls, you will find at least some elements of that. So it's incumbent on the responder who shows up to verify that the call details are in fact accurate and to do their own investigation. As a paramedic, investigating the medical complaint. Maybe a call came through as a fall, but you get there and you realize it's probably a domestic violence situation. Or, I mean, that's just one example. But the point I'm making is that you can't just read your call details and make a decision on how that call is, on the reality of that situation. And it certainly seems to me, although I wasn't on this call, obviously, it certainly seems to me that on the police's part, a decision appears to have been made before even arriving at that door. And no amount of, my situation is that it seems to me that no amount of collateral information or other forms of verifying the facts were ever applied. And it's a really scary thing. And I'm a gun owner myself, and an avid gun owner, and I think it's terrifying. The freedoms can so haphazardly, and even for non-gun, this should concern even non-gun owners, because if it can happen to the safest, most verified, we get a background check every single day to be gun owners in Canada, and if it can happen to us, it can happen to anyone in this country, and anyone who has any libertarian streak to them or who believes in their rights should be extremely concerned about this kind of behavior.
Jake, really good points. And I'm also going to disclose, in the interest, again, I'm a journalist and an advocate, and I haven't checked in terms of fact checking. I have, so Kassandra has shown me her email to police. Jake, I've seen your badge. I have not checked with the police. I have not checked with judges or legal experts. So I'm only getting, I want to reiterate here for disclosure, we're only getting one side of the story. I would also like to talk about the red flag laws, and I'd like to get Kassandra into your personal experience, because you're not just you're how to say, you're not an average recreational shooter who got her training or her safety course and her proficiency. You're a highly trained competitor. I believe you are also a trainer.
So yes, I can definitely answer to that. I started my training with the attitude of being very diligent about safety. And for that reason, I trained with amazing professionals at Chimera Firearms. And I have taken every single courses from basic to intermediate to advanced, from safety to marksmanship, just to make myself that much more proficient. And for me, there's no limit to perfection. And I trust
Chimera teaches law enforcement, military, commercial, civilians, fast-paced action situations, high-stress situations, skill, marksmanship, judgment, decision-making, all of that, right? It's not Olympic level, but it's certainly high level. It's not what you get in an average club orientation.
That's absolutely correct. And the whole reason behind Chimera mindset and is that to educate population and to make them that much safer as gun owners and as gun enthusiasts. But as you correctly indicated, not only that I am a licensed RPL holder and I've trained with Chimera with all the safety courses, my dream has always been competition. It's a very tough world to be in. It's highly male dominated, I must admit. And I was always fascinated. I was fascinated with the sport. I was fascinated and how strict the process of admission is. And I said to myself, if I'm going to be shooting rounds downrange, I may as well do it in the best fashion possible. I went through the course and I completed my black badge course, which allows you to enter the sport, which is called IPSC. It is International Practical Shooting Confederation. I completed that course September the 30th. The day after, police opened my door with their key. It was so disheartening and disappointing. And you feel, as a licensed gun owner, you feel how fragile your freedom is and how susceptible you are to the system's scrutiny and how easily the system can be utilized against you.
So you did, and just to recap, there's 2.2 million men and women in Canada with a firearm license. There's about 2,000 IPSC, IPSC black badge holders in Canada. So you have a level of proficiency and discipline and skill and handling and decision making under stress. You have a level of training of one out of 1,000 people. So already to get and maintain a firearm license, you have to pass a higher standard than most people. And now, even within that close, safe, responsible demographic, you are one out of 1,000. And still, none of that was taken into consideration, that you still got raided and confiscated and sent to the mental hospital.
None of that, precisely, none of that was heard, none of that was taken into consideration. But what was more disappointing than anything is that when I named IPSC and when I named Black Badge Course and when I showed them my equipment, they had blank stare in their eyes.
They have, well, there's no reason for them to there's no reason for them to know about that.
And now on that training element also, I have personally, I was Kassandra's tactical medicine instructor. That's how we met. She was one of my best students, and actually now she's started helping me in teaching my courses. I brought her into courses to assist, because that's how quickly she picks up the material, how diligent she is with her training, and how on the ball she is. For someone who's never served a day in the military or on a police force, she's certainly extremely impressive and definitely comparable to anyone who does, and takes training extremely seriously, and is always striving for self-improvement. So the fact that this happened to her of all people is shocking.
And to reinforce that point, would it be fair to say that as a range helper in that type of environment, again, we're not talking about simple club, we're talking about a much more dynamic situation where I believe Chimera uses not live rounds, but you need to, how to say, part of what you need to do is identify people who might be a safety risk.
Absolutely. We as IPSC shooters, anytime you are out there on the range, you absolutely must have your situational awareness at a highest level to be safe yourself and to keep those around you safe. So most certainly, and Taylor and Chimera uses not only that they use simulation, they also use live training. So, and I have done both. I have done both for many years with them, and I appreciate Jake's explanation as to my skill level and as to my awareness level. So none of that was taken into consideration when proceeding to forcefully take me, cuffing me to the stretcher, humiliating me, and stripping me of my feminine dignity. And that was really disheartening, because the system, if system does that to people like me, system can do that to anybody. And it is our job as legal and licensed gun owners to not only educate our own community and support our community, but also to try to do more, to give more education and information to our police force so that they can do the job and not put themselves in maybe an extra risk, just because information is power. Knowledge is power, guys. Seriously.
And that's also really important, that there are a lot of police officers who, besides having their duty gear and doing what they do on the job, they're also the people we see on the range down the line, in the match. Some of them are totally get this. They're highly proficient, trained far beyond, trained as civilians, far beyond anything they'd get on the job. So this is not meant to be anti-cop. We're looking for solutions here. We're trying to hear your experience. Why do you think so many people stay quiet? Why do you think so many people don't break the silence to talk about the flaws, how this system that is supposed to be for public safety actually endangers people?
Absolutely, Nico, to your point, it's absolutely nothing to do with I'm not anti-police. I respect law enforcement. I worked close encounters with them as a medical and legal interpreter for many years. So all the respect to our force. However, I think it's the flaw of and the misinformation and lack of awareness and ability to analyze certain pieces of information that can really help you de-escalate the conflict, de-escalate the situation to the point where it's not necessary. And I'm telling you, as not only as an outsider, not as a outlooker, but also somebody who experienced that firsthand. And when, in this case, I had to take all my training that I had and put all the efforts into de-escalating the situation that I feel escalated.
What would have happened if you were doing some home training when this happened?
I can comment on what home training is. So as IPSC, for us, draw speed is everything in the sport because our score depends on that. And when I
Draw
mean
speed, you mean from a ready position, grabbing the firearm in the holster and presenting it to the target.
precisely. So our gear consists of a belt, magazine holders, and magazine pouches, and the firearm itself. So the exercise looks like you're drawing your firearm, presenting it to the target, and you're practicing that over and over and over again in order to build muscle memory. If you ever looked for the videos for IPSC training, this is the first exercise that one would do.
So it's speed and accuracy. You need to get, when the timer goes, you need to get the gun out fast, make your hits, and the winner is the person who gets the most accurate hits in the least time. So you want to do it fast.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you,
Okay.
thank you, and Nico. But more importantly, not only that you want to do it fast, you want to do it safely.
Right.
And that is one of the most important aspects of that training, because in IPSC you are disqualified immediately if RO considers range officer considers you to have broken the 90-degree angle or other super stringent safety rules that are out there and need to be observed by every competitor.
So
So
if you were doing your home training,
yes, so every a competitor would normally train 20 minutes in the morning. That's what's recommended. So if I were doing my normal training, if I had my holster belt on my hip and the gun in the holster, me drawing it, when they came in unannounced, I very well may say that I might not have been there today to talk about this.
so
Because
everything that went wrong, and just also to situate people who don't know, it's quite common for any kind of competitor or to train at home. A lot more training happens without ammunition. It's called what they call dry training, or dry practice, dry firing, training without ammunition in terms of sight alignment and body position and muscles and all sorts of stuff that you don't need to do at the range with live ammunition. You can do that in your living room or your basement. Um, Everything that went wrong, as you described, if you had been in your gear in that training situation at home and they unlock the door and see that could have everything that went wrong could have gone much worse.
yes,
Like
absolutely,
for them, for
Just for
you.
those, yes,
Well,
absolutely.
like,
For those who don't, if the non-gun owners are listening to this, we can explain that dry firing, what this means is that there's no live ammunition present.
Right.
The law says that the ammunition is to be kept in the other part of the house, locked up. You can never have them together. So there would be no live ammunition ever present under the circumstances of dry fire training. However, if officers did not evaluate all the other information available to them, how would they possibly know?
Because they've shown they're ignorant of the law, they've shown they're ignorant of everything, which is, again, it's not their job to know every single law. But again, in a situation of uncertainty, if you had been in your front room training, yeah.
Yes.
see, I don't believe that Canada is the kind of place where no knock warrantless entries of people's homes is something that should ever be considered the norm. And again, police have a very tough job, and I am not anti-police in any way. I have lots of friends who are police officers. I've served this country from the time I was old enough to work. So you know, they have a tough job, and we need to respect their job, and they have a lot of tough decisions and judgment calls that they have to make on a daily basis. And I respect that. I understand that. As a first responder, I totally empathize with that. It strikes me as one person, one individual officer on this call, it seems to me, that came in with a preconceived idea and was not open to other information that contradicted that idea. And the escalation of that was totally unnecessary, in my opinion, from an outsider's opinion. And the no-knock nature of the entry, when someone could potentially have a firearm in their hand, is, if I were in the shoes of the person entering that apartment, that condo, I would not have done that the same way. Because I wouldn't want to have a situation where, you know, I would have to draw on fire on someone or anything like that. You know, she wouldn't have even had the opportunity to put her firearm away if she was doing dry training. They would have just come in. And she wouldn't have known who was coming in. And it could have been, you know, this is a person who has been threatened by death, threatened with death by her ex-husband. What if it was him? You know, and what if, as an instinct, you turn and present yourself at the door, potential threat comes in? Then what do the officers see? Right? Oh. It's a terrifying thought of how this could have gone. We try not to be too anti-police, and we try and give them the respect and the benefit of the doubt, but there should not be a situation in a free society where one person on a summary basis can make a decision that affects someone's freedoms in such a way that takes such a long time to get out of. It's really a scary reality in a free society.
I'd like to ask you both, I believe the purpose of the so-called red flag law, the mental health thing, is to, if there is a person who is actually a threat to themselves or others, to restrain them quickly. That's the goal. We've seen how it doesn't work. The system is completely broken. Do you have any thoughts, Jake or Kassandra, about what could make it right or make it better?
I could definitely answer to that. Just to clarify, that in our country, there's no self-defense with use of firearm. There's no self-defense that's going to be justifiable ever using firearm. And it is, and firearms to me it's my passion, it's my sport, and it is, to me, the studying on how to make the practice safe was always the only goal and the only reason why I went ahead and got licensed. And there's no reason for me to think that I would ever have to use the art or the work of art that I admire so much in any other fashion other than for sports. So how to make the red flag gun law better? Well, I think right now we already have that whole system in place, and that, as you said, it's completely broken, because you can simply call CMP or can call 911, whatever, and report some spousal and safety concern or public safety concern, and there's no verification of the caller's ID, whatever what is the affiliation of you with that individual, and what kind of evidence do you have, the caller, to support your allegations. The system is completely in favor of those who have been misusing it for many years. And I'm not sure why the politicians feel that they need to give them more power and more strength instead of balancing it out.
So actually the system, this was an abusive ex-husband who gets to abuse you after the separation through the law.
Absolutely. And this was a pure harassment question to the court system as to why was he not charged with mischief. And we tried. He was not charged with mischief because legally it didn't go, it was not investigated enough. And again, I do not want to speak to the job that was done or was not done, and I cannot I am not in the service, I'm not in the force, and I cannot talk about the internal protocols or such investigation. However, between the Crown Attorney and my lawyer, the opinion was that the man should have been put on the stand and then charged. And when I say put on the stand, I mean that the Crown Attorney wanted to push that case forward to trial, to have him come in as a witness so that he could discredit himself, or so that my lawyer and our side could actually discredit him. However, this didn't take place because the police did not feel, no matter how many complaints and how many requests I have made with the 53 division, this was not investigated as mischief. This was not investigated as harassment, and therefore the man is continuously empowered to continue to do the same.
So the same thing could happen in 10 minutes.
Absolutely. And this year I have called our CMP yet again to ask them the same question. I asked, what is going to happen if he calls again? I said, do you realize that this was already done to me before? I am still as legal and as safe and as licensed as I have always been, and I will continue to be a passionate advocate for the safety and for my sport. So can you answer me? Can you protect me as a legal gun owner? And the answer was, no, we cannot. If he makes that call again, we have to investigate again. So,
well, investigate again, but investigate doesn't mean handcuffed to a stretcher and raided and yeah.
Investigate means actually investigate. Investigate doesn't mean take the call details, make a decision, and execute a plan when there is apparent contradictory evidence to the call details. On your earlier question as to what could be done with red flag laws, I think a really big problem with this particular circumstance is that a mental health apprehension. I can steal something from a store and get my criminal record expunged after a few years, but if I'm apprehended under the Mental Health Act for any reason, it's always there. And I think and it's always there based on the judgment call of one police officer on some scene at some point. So I think that there should have to be verification. If there's a Mental Health Act apprehension and they go to hospital and the doctor says, no, they're fine, why does that have to stay on someone's record? When Kassandra goes to renew her gun license, is this going to become an issue?
Because now every time we renew, you have to fill in a background check form that says, have you been charged? Have you been mental troubles? Mm-hmm. Do you know the answer to that? Do you know how do you know how, what happens when you renew?
My license is fairly fresh out of the oven, if you may. So I still have a couple of years before I need to renew it. However, I was informed by one of my friends that a similar thing happened to him, and I think you know who I'm referring to, that yes, it will take longer, there will be an issue. It's not going to be an issue because eventually he did receive his renewal. RCMP made up excuses that it's COVID or whatever, but it is my understanding that it's definitely not going to be the same process as for someone who has squeaky clean record. Yes, definitely.
I'd also like to emphasize again that the entire regulatory legislative framework of firearm ownership in Canada is under the criminal code. So even if you take a detour on the way to the handgun range, or you store your firearms perfectly safely and responsibly, but in a way that is different than what it says in the law, all of those things can be potentially instant criminal code offenses, instant confiscations. There's a huge opportunity here for major justice reform.
Indeed, there is a huge opportunity for major justice reform, and I will let Jake in a second to add to this. I believe that there is as a gun owner, my recommendation to our community is that we are under so much scrutiny that we need to be always very vigilant and verify with a gun law as to how we are to do things, because there's so much room for the abuse of our rights and to find a way to incriminate us is not even funny. So we always have to be hyper vigilant about that and making sure that we're steering clear of anything that can potentially incriminate us. And on that note, most certainly having having a gun insurance policy is absolutely paramount. And when the law is that vague, and when there is so much room for the abuse of that law by some malicious, sinister elements of the society, our only layer of protection on top of ourselves observing the law is to having an insurance policy that can come in and protect us should someone try to do what was done to me.
Jake, did you want to say anything?
I think that I just want to touch on the point that, even if the police are wrong, even if you know that the police are wrong, follow Kassandra's lead. Do what she did. Stay calm. Stay composed. Comply with police instructions. There is absolutely no benefit to getting heated in the moment. It's only going to make it harder for you to get your firearms back. And these things need to be dealt with. Our system dictates that these things need to be dealt with in court. That at the time of apprehension, that the police officer is right and they've made their decision and you can't do anything to stop them legally. So don't even try. Comply. Be polite. Be respectful. Everything Kassandra did, because I think that when you do everything perfectly and they do everything wrong, that's when we open up discussions like this.
I want to offer, I hear what you say, I take what you say. I also want to offer a different perspective from, I've never having been in this situation, but from the people I've spoken with, lawyers and involved parties. There are, so two things, again, the duct tape rule, silent, do not cooperate, do not offer them any information. There's views on that lawyers have recommended. Do not talk to the police. They are not your friend in those times. It's the paradox again. They're the people we call when we feel threatened. When they're out to get us, they are not on our side. And there are people in Canada, lawyers and others, who believe that the Criminal Code Section 34 on self-defense is quite clear. It does allow the legitimate use of force when you are fearing, in certain situations. It does not say how you may protect yourself or your home. And there are people in our country, with and without firearms, who believe unjustified raids might fall under that situation. Glad none of that happened, but it's certainly, I mean, we're talking about your personal experience, but it also raises very, very important legal principles, safety principles of the entire design of the justice system, and very practically in our own homes. What do you do when 4 or 5 unknown strangers with badges and uniforms barge into your home?
Sorry, I'd like to qualify what I said there, because you did bring up a point that I didn't think of. When I said comply with police instructions, I don't mean give up your rights. I don't mean answer all their questions. That's not what I'm saying. When comply with instructions like turn around, put your hands behind your back, you are being detained, etc. Comply with those instructions. If they say open your gun safe, there is no, to my understanding, there is no legal obligation for you to do that. And in fact, showing maximum resistance to those kinds of instructions, to giving up your rights, gives you even more avenues in court at a later date. And yeah, to my understanding, yes, firearms can be used in a dire circumstance in self-defense, but the way our gun laws are structured, and our storage laws are structured in such a way that makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible. And even if you do, and even if you are justified, the cases have shown that you'll likely go to court anyway.
You'll go to court, you'll get charged. It's the what's that expression? The punishment, the process is the punishment. Yeah, the process is the punishment.
Mm-hmm. And even if you're vindicated, you'll be $100,000 in the hole unless you maybe have a firearm insurance policy, paying for your lawyer to get you off your charges and off of a gun prohibition for the rest of your life, or maybe jail.
Plus your reputation. Plus, example in this case, you're hauled off with the cops and paramedics. Like, what do your neighbors think? What do your colleagues think? What does your family think? It raises a lot of, like, this. We're touching some really big things that are far beyond what we can deal with in this call. Why do you think, again, what I'm curious about why you stepped forward after thinking about it for a year, and again, what's special about you that no one else is doing? Why are you the one to take this battle?
Why am I the one to take the lead? Well, I guess I have felt compelled to take on the offer and to speak out to make this public, partially because I never thought that let me explain how I feel first. After what was done to me on that day, and after how I had to experience that whole safety and wellness check, nothing felt like wellness anymore. And I had tough times staying in my home where all these horrible events took place. I have felt really uncomfortable with police officers being around me, ever encountering them through work or other things. And I must say that I owe that to my community, I think, because I have never felt more supported as they all came forward one after another to support me through the women. When they are intimidated by larger individuals, larger males, and in general, there isn't a big difference between how I felt and how women who experience rape feel, because it's the being stripped of your dignity and the humiliation that sits deep inside, and it makes you feel so powerless and so vulnerable. And I'm not a vigilante by nature, so I feel that by bringing that information forward, by speaking out, by making others aware of this is not a Me Too movement. This is what someone experiences when the organization that is designed to protect actually goes against you and makes you feel that way. So it was very important. And then when I started making phone, I never thought that I was going to receive the support that I actually did receive. So I own that. I own being here today, the power, the empowerment, and the certainty and the conviction of this, that it is my time to talk about this, is because I want everybody else to know that they need to take every action possible to make sure that they're not as vulnerable as I ever was. Because if you are if you're a middle-aged male who has been in the hunting shooting for many years, and then you go through a divorce where the spouse isn't happy with your financial settlement, you never know who is going to be knocking on your door. You may not be a little girl like myself, but you will feel just as terrible inside. And I want to make sure that the community that supported me is going to be as safe as they possibly can, because I love being a member of that group, and I think we are the most organized, the safest group, the safest part of the demographics here. But it can happen to anyone, be you the guy or the girl or whatever.
I want to ratify that. Yeah, the statistics show that if you have, well, in Canada, because of the way the law is structured, the public safety threat are the people without the guns. The people with the guns and the gun licenses, they are the safest people in the country. I also want to correct something I said. I want to recognize that you're stepping forward, but I was wrong to say that you're the first. There are other people who have stepped forward in their own case over the years, and I just wanted to rectify that. Touching quickly on what happened on May 1st of this year with Justin Trudeau in the confiscations prohibition, did he, in a matter of speaking, red flag all of us by saying we are too dangerous to own certain arms, have our rights restricted, right now he's ordered confiscation? Did we, hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands of people get red flagged?
This is wrong on so many different levels. It is absolutely incredible how unjustifiable this move by Trudeau was, because there's a very good expression that it's not the guns that kill people. By working with by numbering property that some of us may have owned, and by telling us legal gun owners that we're now to put them back in a closet and never take them out to the range again. It does absolutely nothing, but it makes it look good to uninformed members of society. It creates more biases by doing what he did.
And we don't know how the mechanics, we don't know how operationally it will happen. But one possibility, if Trudeau, if the government deems that we are too dangerous to own this property, we could be getting, well, a lot of people could end up in a situation like you. Look, the government has said you're too dangerous, you're a threat, we're taking your stuff. How many more cases like yours are on the horizon? I don't know. None of us knows.
I think all of us as a community, as gun owners, I think we all feel violated. What I felt October the 1st, I'm speaking openly now, I think we all feel like that after that list came out. We feel violated. We feel handcuffed. There's nothing we can do.
Let's just keep in mind for a minute that some of the incidents that the government has used to justify these bans, the Nova Scotia mass shooting, illegal firearms with a non-licensed a former criminal firearm owner, the Danforth mass shooting, some call it a terrorist attack, was carried out by an unlicensed person with an illegal firearm. Many of the about 95% of the shootings you see in the media are unlicensed people with illegal firearms. The rhetoric being used by the government, the totally unnecessary rhetoric now when they're talking about firearms that are going to be banned that carry high capacity magazines. Well, we don't have high capacity magazines in Canada. We are pinned to 5 rounds or 10 rounds if it's a handgun. So that government argument is completely moot. The language that they've used saying they're going to take away semi-automatics that have sustained rapid fire capability. That's too many words in that sentence. They could just say semi-automatics, but what I think they're doing is trying to massage this messaging into the public minds to make things sound more dangerous than they are. And the effects of these laws are not going to be felt where they're needed. They're not going to be felt by criminal gangs. They're not going to be felt by the people doing the shootings. And anyone, as the van attack that occurred, the disgusting, horrible van attack that occurred in Toronto shows us, anyone who is bent on murder, someone who is bent on destruction, does not need a firearm to carry that out. And if we are going to justify Orwellian measures, and if we're going to use lone wolf attack to justify Orwellian measures being taken on us, this is a lie being perpetrated on the Canadian population. I'm not a fan of Bill C-51 under the last government that justifies online spying. That was done in response to the Parliament attack, which was another lone wolf shooter with another illegally of monitoring our communications and reading all of our emails would have stopped that attack. No amount of these gun laws are going to stop the gun crimes that are currently happening in Canada. This is, I believe, an agenda of civilian disarmament that is unfortunately popular in most of the Canadian population, because most of the Canadian population doesn't own guns. And when they hear this kind of messaging, it's scary. This messaging is, I say this to many people, I believe this messaging is designed at targeting suburban soccer moms to make them think that the Liberal government is doing this great job to keep us safe, and B, to scare people into compliance with into support of these laws, when really we are the safest citizens in Canada.
And I think the politicians and the people who wrote the laws, the government staff who write the laws, have a responsibility for when they write broken laws and things go belly up like they did in this case.
Absolutely.
Before I'd like to close by asking you guys, especially Kassandra, if you have a message for politicians and others working on red flag laws or firearm policy in general. But before we close out, any last thoughts that we need to rectify or elaborate?
Well, I think the main message here is that I'd like to make sure that my fellow shooters and gun owners are staying safe. And by that, I mean read the law again and again. Make sure you do it, make sure you observe it to the T. If you encounter the police and they are acting unreasonably, just rely on that very same law, remain calm, make sure that that you that you convey your message very clearly. Do not escalate anything, because you got to understand that there may be officers present that are unable to use their de-escalation skills.
De-escalation, like de-escalate, you mean? Yeah,
Yes,
like bring it down. Yeah.
exactly. Bring it down, calm the situation down. So stay calm, stay calm, and stay calm, and make sure that you go and get yourself something that lets you sleep at night, which is whatever the size of the policy that you decide to get. I highly recommend having this. And last month, when it comes to the politicians writing these broken laws, well, if any of these politicians are actual gun owners, they would actually never write the law like that. So for those who are writing and for those who have not obtained the license, I suggest they go through the process. I suggest they study the book, they do the safety training, and after they pass the rigorous safety training, they can go back to the drawing board and then see what they write on it. Once they have studied the law that they created inside out, they will understand that everything else that they write is absolutely redundant.
See, on my end, I don't have a message for politicians because I don't honestly have much faith in most of the politicians in this country, regardless of party. I have a message to the people of this country, and that it's incumbent on anyone in a free society to act not only when the rights and freedoms that they enjoy are under threat, but when the rights and freedoms of anyone in their country are under threat. Because if someone else's rights and freedoms are under threat, yours are too. And it doesn't matter what those rights and freedoms are. And if the government can take them away from the safest citizens in this country, then imagine what they can do to everybody else. So, Canadians, where is your outrage? Even non-gun owners, where is your outrage? This needs to change.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, that's part of, I mean, part of what I was interested in. For me, yeah, I realize I have ex-girlfriends, any or whatever, like any of us, ex-boyfriends, girlfriends, husband, wife, whatever. Everybody in the country who has a firearm license is a potential, like they could be the next guest on the video. Like there's millions of people who are facing the same situation.
Yes, and Nick, I'd like to also address my community. Hopefully, as many members of our shooting community watches that. I want to make sure we all come together. It is. We need to stand for our reputation. We are one of the safest communities in the world, if I may say that. And no offense to other parts of the world, to our international guests and our international competitors. However, the law is so tight and we watch it so closely that I believe that one thing is to remaining silent isn't going to help our situation. They're continuing to push us into the corner because we always obey, because we always abide, and we always observe the law to the T. So let's come together and make our voices heard. Let's not just
Thank you, and thank you everyone for watching and reading thegunblog.ca.
Thank you, Nicholas, for having me.